So I just finished Space Marine 2, and oh my god, do I want to talk about it. Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2 is probably my favorite game that I've played in a very, very long time. I just completed the game, and I fell in love with it. So about 2 years ago, Space Marine 2 got announced that it was going to be coming in September of 2024, and needless to say, it tickled my pickle. Now, at the time, I wasn't super ingrained in Warhammer. I did have a basic understanding of it, of, orcs and, the Space Marines and the God Emperor and all of this. And I understood it. I thought it was very cool, but I wasn't super deep in the lore and reading all the books. And I definitely wasn't giving half of my yearly income to Games Workshop to buy the little miniatures, as cool as they are. I didn't get that deep into it. But needless to say, I was still really excited for Space Marine 2. Now, I hadn't played any other Space Marine games up until that point, but once I heard that Space Marine 2 was going to be coming out, I thought I might as well look into some of the other games. And so I didn't get Space Marine 1, but I have seen all the gameplay of it. And so after watching Space Marine 1, I fell in love with it. It was a short, simple game, and it got the point across pretty well. Space Marine 2 reflected a lot of what I thought was similar for Space Marine 1. It was a short, simple, story-driven game that was still really difficult. But let me tell you, Space Marine 2, if I didn't already believe in the God Emperor of mankind, if I didn't already believe that the universe was overcome with heretic Xenos, abominational demons, and heretic abominations and demons and creatures crawling out from the miasma of the warp, and if the God Emperor told me that the only way that he could survive was if I died, I would tell him, your grace, your holiness, let me take it. Let me sit on the throne. So in essence, the story picks up at the back end of the first game. I'm not quite sure how far after the first game is that this one is set, but it picks up right where we play as Titus. He's a Space Marine that was an Ultramarine. Also, spoilers, I guess, going in for this video. If you haven't already played the game, go play it, go watch it, but I'm going to talk about it. Oh, you get to play as Titus, considering at the end of the first game that he did some questionable things, some things that could be, one could consider heresy. And so he was a part of a Space Marine chapter, I think they're a chapter, of Death Watch. And you end up fighting a bunch of Tyranids. If you don't know what Tyranids are, they're just a bunch of xenomorphs that all are belonging to one simple hive mind, and they are brutal. They're probably my favorite Xenos race, Xenos faction in Warhammer behind the Astra Militarum. I love the Astra Militarum. They're probably my favorite other faction besides the Imperium of Man, and they are unrelenting. Literally, the game is just a knuckles down, drag out brawl of killing hordes and hordes of Tyranids, and oh my god, do I love it. Now, the game starts with a Tyranid invasion of just this random planet, and you're essentially being tasked with clearing out all these Tyranids. But more importantly, because there is a super weapon that's on the planet that they need to get out called Project Aurora. And you come to find out that the device that's powering Project Aurora is actually the MacGuffin from the first game. If you didn't already play the first game, they explain pretty well, kind of going into what happened with Titus, why he acts the way he does after the first game, and explaining what this thing is and why it's important, and how it connects with later enemies that you find later on. So the first half, I guess you could even call it half, or first 2/3 of the game is you fighting the Tyranids. And these guys do not give a fuck. It is constant battle and defense points where you are just firing into massive hordes of literal hundreds of Tyranids, and it is so much fun. Now, with this, it kind of gets into the combat, and the combat is simple. You have a handful of guns, and you have a melee weapon Your attack pattern is pretty basic, and you do it over and over again. You can dodge, you can parry, you get like a counter thing that you can do. And so it's pretty simple, and you do basically the same thing over and over again. And you can pick up grenades and items and ammo, and you can switch out your loadout across the games and across all the different missions. And even going from mission to mission, you can change your loadout and your appearance, which is super cool. And it's as short and as small as it is. I think I love it. It's not complicated. It's pretty straightforward. All the different guns that you can get are only slightly different in terms of like maybe their range and if they're like fully auto or not. But you want to know what? I'm fine with that. Or like their like reload speed or their attack speed, like for our melee weapons. And even though that the combat system is pretty basic, I did not have a problem with it. The fact that the primary core of the game is you just trying to survive against hordes of aliens was more than enough for me. That I didn't need to have this super complex system with perks and trees and swapping out abilities and this massive array of weapons, though I know that there's more weapons that weren't put in the game. And there's other stuff that probably didn't get added into the game that could have been there. I was more than satisfied with what I got. And when it came to all the different combos and stuff you could do, the fact that you got to just stand there, tank the hits, and just cut through swaths of meat and blood made it all worth it. Not to mention the executions. Don't get me... Every time I got to do a execution, whether it was on a tiny little... one of the Hermagonts, the little just regular drone dudes, or on one of the big, massive abomination guys, my testosterone levels shot through the roof. Now, when it came down to the actual enemies and what you could fight, there wasn't a crazy array, but you want to know what? I still think that there was fine. When it come to the Tyranids, you had like just your basic minions. There was like some drones that were like one hit and did a lot of damage, but were slow. You had like your flying minions. You had like your more ranged, tankier soldiers that had like melee weapons and ranged weapons. Then you got to like some of your more like advanced or elite Tyranids. You had like I think the Lictors were the ones that like slid around. You had ones that could like turn invisible. You had big Carnifexes were these just massive tank ones that just gave no shits and wanted to slam you down and tell you who daddy was. And god damn it, did they do it. So even though the array of it wasn't big, considering the amount of Tyranids that there actually are, I was more than satisfied. And the psychic, I completely forgot about the fucking psychic ones. The ones that were flying and could make shields and shoot lasers. It was crazy. So essentially the first 2/3 of the game were you jumping from planet to planet, fighting against the Tyranids, and trying to stop them from taking over this planet, which you eventually do. You do end up stopping the Tyranids, but not before you find out that, what's that? Chaos! So let me tell you right now, I was already having fun fighting the Tyranids. If the game was just about fighting the Tyranids, then whoop-de-doo, you would have take more of my money. If there was a DLC that came out that was $500, I would have done it. I would have absolutely bought it if it was just like, you get to fight 2 more kinds of Tyranids. I'll do it. I do not care. But oh my god, did I jump out of my seat like a happy little schoolgirl when I saw that we were going to be fighting Chaos. Now, you already fight Chaos in the first game. You do fight demons. But when I found out that not only are you fighting Chaos Guard, which are just like the minions, Imperial Guard minions of Chaos, and Chaos Demons, you got to fight Chaos Space Marines, let alone the Thousand Suns. So for those of you that don't know, the Thousand Suns are basically like a very magic-oriented Chaos Space Marine chapter. If you don't know what Chaos Space Marines, they're just evil Space Marines, really. And they want the MacGuffin, and they end up getting the MacGuffin, and they're trying to, I think, also use it to take over a planet and destroy the Imperium, which everyone else, I guess, is apparently already doing. So once you defeat the Tyranids, you end up and you start fighting the Chaos Space Marines, and that was a fun change of pace. You got to fight all the different kinds of minions. You got to fight the Guard. You got to fight the demons. And you got to fight the Thousand Suns Space Marines. And there was not a whole lot of variety when it came to them. All the guns were either the same. You had your standard Space Marine, Thousand Suns Space Marine, and then you had like the Terminator ones that shot like heat-seeking magic missiles at you that never missed. God damn it, did I hate the Terminators. But even though that was the case, I still had just as much fun fighting the Chaos Space Marines as I did the Tyranids. Then you come to find out that you're fighting this disc-flying, Green Goblin-looking sorcerer that stole the MacGuffin and is trying to fight you. So you end up going to a planet that a tomb world that belonged to the Necrons, bunch of undead they're just a bunch of undead robots that don't die, and they want to flay your skin off. You end up going to one of those planets, and oh my god, was the last chapter of this game so good. Let me tell you, the cinematics of the last back half of this game were so good. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, I was jumping around, and I was glued to my screen. When you got to fight all of the hordes of the Chaos Demons and Chaos Space Marines that were pouring through the portals, and you just got to stand there and shoot, and you're with your other Ultra Marines and facing off against essentially unbeatable odds, there was nothing more that I wanted to do than to lay down my life for the Emperor and save the galaxy. And oh my god, did this game give me my fantasy. Undoubtedly, it gave me my fantasy. But that back half of it, when you're charging up the hill with Lord Calgar, the chapter master, and you're pushing with the tanks, and there's the big juggernaut, and there's like storms everywhere, and there's like a big blue dragon flying around. God, I was ready to just. Oh my god, like this game literally had me speechless by the end. And when it got to the point where you're fighting against the final sorcerer, and you're beating him, and there's all the illusions and all the magic going around, it was so much fun. And the ending cinematics and the ending to this game, I could have easily teared up. I didn't. I easily could have. But oh my god, was it satisfying as hell. It looked beautiful. It made me feel something. Now, from what I understand, some people thought that this game was too short and that it was maybe too story-driven and it was too simple and it wasn't enough. And to the people that are saying that, I genuinely have no idea what game you were playing, and I would love to know what game that is, because that's not what this was. Now, granted, the game was only like 6 to 7 hours, but the missions, were actually pretty long. Each mission, depending on what your difficulty was, which I played on Veteran, which was like the second highest difficulty, which is what they said the game was meant to be played on, which is the one I did. That one, it would take me like 15, maybe 20 minutes to complete a mission. It wasn't like Call of Duty where it took you like 5, maybe 10 minutes to do one. You complete one part, then you move on to the next, and the next, and the next. And on top of that, it was challenging. I will definitely say it is a lot harder if you aren't playing with your friends. The AI isn't exactly the smartest, and there were definitely a lot of times where I found myself yelling at Gadriel and Chiron to stop glitching out or to please target something, and they wouldn't do it. But once you got to play it with friends, then it was so much fun. But for those people, I did not have an issue at all with the length of it. Like for me, I enjoyed it being a shorter game. And even though the combat was simple, I enjoyed it being very story driven. And on top of that, even with the campaign, there's still a bunch of extra stuff outside of it. There's the operations, which you can do with people. which were like smaller side missions that were like happening at the same time as the campaign missions were happening. So it wasn't just some random mission that you got to do, kind of like in Call of Duty Modern Warfare where you could just do random missions and co-op for like stars. These were missions that were happening at the same time as campaign missions that you could do to connect to the main story. And you could do them with your friends. And then on top of that, there's the PvP with, I think it's Eternal Wars, the PvP, which has been a lot of fun. And from what I understand, they're going to be adding in other operations and hopefully expanding on Eternal War with the appearances and the guns and all that, and maybe doing different modes and adding more modes in there. So I'm excited for that. But considering that that is what the game is, I was more than satisfied with the amount that we had. Now, if having a longer game and you were hoping that there would be more to the combat and more to the enemy types and that there would just be more missions available for the main campaign, if that was what your cup of tea was, then yeah, if that's what your cup of tea is, great. I'm sorry that you didn't feel the same way that I did with the game. It just wasn't meant for that, but I guarantee you they're going to be adding more and more onto the game as it goes. I will say that the one singular gripes that I had with this game just came down to the difficulty on top of the AI that I talked about before. It definitely is a game that you're going to want to play with other people, not even just to make the missions easier, but really just have a lot more fun. This game really made it feel like I was sitting on my couch again, playing co-op Call of Duty, or reminiscent of early Helldivers. Like, if you're going to play this game, do it with friends. You can do it with just the PvE. You can just do it with AI, and you'll have just as much fun if you want to stay locked in on the story. All in all, I honestly would probably give this game like a solid 9.5 out of 10. The game was solid. The story was amazing. I enjoyed the visuals. I enjoyed the combat. I enjoyed there was just... What more can I say? This game was amazing. It's probably going to be in contention, in my opinion, for Game of the Year. You could probably make an argument for like Black Myth or maybe Helldivers. I think Helldiver came out this year. But all in all, go and play this game. The question comes down to, is the game worth buying? Yes, 100% this game is worth buying for the short experience and for the long term. Go ahead and sink your money to it. It'll be worth it. But go ahead. See ya, guys.